I will introduce myself. My name is Peter. I am a now disabled, retired, registered nurse in New York State, having been a registered nurse for 38 years, working in every aspect of adult, child, forensic, research, emergency room, outpatient, every aspect of behavioral health and psychiatry throughout my career. In addition to having been an officer in the U.S. Army Nurse Corps Reserves, having been honorably discharged as a first lieutenant, and having been a first responder on 9/11 at Ground Zero, a team designed to respond to other responders. Whatever I have experienced, whatever I have learned throughout my life, I am a culmination of those experiences. I do say that anything I say is purposeful, and nothing is new to me. I have said it all before. The thing is, I've said it to myself endlessly. I have said a lot of things to myself. Some good, most bad. As my symptomatology gets worse and worse week by week, waiting now 5 weeks until I will have an ACDF surgery fusion on my cervical spine at Lenox Hospital. The surgery I had wanted over a year ago to give me any chance at all of completing any type of vestibular rehabilitation or any type of physical therapy at all, because about 9 months ago, I was required to stop physical therapy or anything due to excruciating, scorching, due to pain that I still lack words to accurately describe, due to dysautonomia that I have yet to be officially diagnosed with or addressed or treated. Everything I have endured, every challenge I have been saddled with, I have faced and dealt with. So really, I am here to explain both how I have managed to hang in there and why. The how and the why of everything have been so critical to me to understand, because after suffering a traumatic brain injury on a regular day at my nursing job at South Beach Psychiatric Center on 17 September 2024, what I guess should have been a regular day at work, because I do not remember anything from that day or days before then, that day at work plunged me into hell. And I have been, in a sense, to hell and back. But I say that literally. Some creativity and intelligence can be a tremendous asset in life. On the edges between life and death, with severe brain injuries, creativity and some intelligence can be what propels a person into hell. I have always known the power of storytelling. I didn't understand the neuroscience aspects of rewiring the brain or accessing circuits to restore memories, or maybe to actually complete and access new memories, which is another thing I have been unable to do. With no short-term memory and damaged long-term memories, I cannot enter anything into my memory. So, with my remaining intelligence and with sheer discipline, the amount of which I have been startled again and again by how very much discipline I do possess, with that and a sense of willpower that I am beginning to believe is more than any one person should possess. But I do. So for every possible reason for me to give up or actually unalive myself, I have been a red flag in every possible way for a long time. As someone who was always a mandated reporter and in the past an assist trainer, I taught suicide prevention to clinicians who would teach it to other people, and harm reduction. I have always believed in that. In my travels as a registered nurse, or in every possible title and role with NAMI New York City, Staten Island, leading me to become a peer facilitator, someone who publicly on record is a man living with mental health concerns. I chuckle now because I no longer have any mental health concerns at all. I'm just living, as so many others are, with mental illness, which I once referred to during my podcast on the NPO Media podcast, which I produced and ran from 2016 to 2022. I referred to chronic mental illnesses as brain disorders. The reason I did that was because things were shifting too far to the left. In the war on stigma that was running extreme, the war on words came with it. I have always been aware and compliant with APA guidelines, never saying negative, cruel words to dismiss people living with severe brain disorders and or mental illnesses, to water down what people are actually struggling with, to just be accepted by the general public. Those wars on words, I think, are partly responsible for my career-ending, life-destroying injuries one random day at the hospital where I worked at, in my 25th year there and my 38th year as a registered nurse in New York State. And on that day, the 17th of September 2024, after I reportedly spoke to a defendant, not a patient, a defendant who had manipulated his way into getting directly admitted to that hospital, a civil component of the Office of Mental Health of New York State, sent directly by parole from somewhere else because the person reported feeling suicidal or some kind of psychosis, without clearing his warrants, which have been found ever since intervention from Governor Hochul and the backing of the union that I was a steward with for one term and could not remember after I woke up from a coma. New York State PEF, with about 45,000 members in public healthcare workforce, has had my back and my family's back since day one. And now it is my honor that they are working on a bill or something with New York State Legislature to, one, protect healthcare professionals, and two, if one is injured, do not play the games workers' comp has played with me to get any amount of life-saving medical or surgical care necessary. What I didn't do to prevent my own self getting care, what I didn't do to keep my mouth shut at a time when I absolutely had my voice, but would not allow myself to use my voice. Workers' comp, New York State insurance funds may very possibly be the nails in my coffin. So really, why am I here? Why am I speaking now? Because it is important for me to teach anyone that I can reach, be it clinicians, student clinicians, individuals living with traumatic brain injuries or medical traumatic brain injuries, whether it's from falling, trauma to the head, strokes, neurodegenerative illnesses, Alzheimer's, dementia, MS, whatever it might be. When a person gets to a stage where they have lost so much, where they do not feel like the person they once were, but what they start doing is hiding behind a mask of shame and embarrassment. I have done all that, and unexpectedly and remarkably, I'm still here. So what will I do now? The same thing I've been doing day after day for many months. Being in absolute survival mode. Literally trying to just survive another day. I cannot eat. I can barely drink water. I am emaciated away. I have cervicogenic spins, vertigo spins, complete dysregulation and dysautonomia of every system of my body. The worst of which is my mind. I live with the invisible syndrome every hour of every day. It's from a good place in people's hearts that they might see me and say, "How are you? Are you okay?" And they may think to themselves, well, maybe he didn't plan on retiring at 58, but hopefully he's pursuing some hobbies or walking around or doing music or his podcast or something. When in reality, although I might say, "I'm hanging in there, thanks," that's not the honest answer. It's so much less than the truth. But I feel the truth is not appropriate for just anyone. So I am thankful I have the insight to know that not everyone needs to know everything. so I do not blurt things out. For over a year, I have had no access to the Google Photos and the corporate accounts I meticulously assembled, for which I was under the nonprofit administrator wing of Google and Microsoft for access to services and products through my work as the volunteer IT coordinator with NAMI New York City, Staten Island, a position for which I had no formal training. That somewhat speaks to my entire life, because the things I have accomplished and the things I have done were generally all things I had no academic preparation for. They were things that I learned and skills I built in myself. In my neurodivergent way, by quietly obsessing about things until I learned what I felt comfortable with, to do the thing that was consistent throughout my career as a nurse. Wherever I went, whatever I did, there was one thing that drove me to never quit trying to learn, trying to change things, build protocols and policies, teach. The thing behind all that always was that I was doing what I needed to do to potentially save the lives or provide an opportunity for recovery for my peers. By that, I mean the patients I was responsible for the well-being of. In middle management through most of my nursing career, I never wanted to career climb. I never had aspirations for higher rank. And honestly, I was comfortable being boots on the ground more so. But I learned boundaries. I learned how to communicate with people. And one of the newest things I'm learning as a lifelong empath, I was a selfless empath for my entire life. I don't know if that is an accurate word to describe it, but it seems to fit me perfectly. By selfless, I mean I did things I did always to advocate for others, and that was always for others who were members of marginalized and vulnerable communities. It turns out I am also a member of those same communities. Maybe that's where my passion came from. And if it is, I'm okay with that. Because what I'm learning is that sometimes in life, people go far above and beyond the minimum requirements for their positions, for their jobs, because it's personal. When something is personal and it affects you, your family, loved ones, people you care about, you push yourself a little harder to learn, to do, to make a difference. It's why someone I never met before a few weeks ago said to me, "You should get a lawyer and sue that hospital. Why do you care about that hospital? Close it down, screw them, you know?" And I said, I do care. And I want the hospital to be what it was built to be. why I was at the groundbreaking of the hospital where my career ended and my life was destroyed. I was at that groundbreaking ceremony in 1975 with my mother and my father being the first president of the first Board of Visitors of South Beach Psychiatric Center, a place that he, as head of the South Shore Rotary and the South Shore Republican Party or whatever, and a real estate agent, got New York State to buy that parcel of land, condemn everything on it, and build the first South Beach Psychiatric Center. I was at the groundbreaking, and then I was at that facility 3 years later after my father died in an accident, and my mom, who was a single mom with no career skills, pulled strings to get a night shift job as a mental health therapy aide on Thanksgiving of 78 or something like that. Then, as a young boy, neurodivergent as can be, but with ADHD inattentive type and major depression. So I was not running around and shouting and hyper this or that. I was silent, and people assumed I was on drugs or just out of it or just not paying attention. I wasn't on drugs, and I was paying attention to everything except what I needed to at the time. Being hypervigilant and paying too much attention to things, being so sensitive, but having separated the emotional and obsessive aspect of myself from my behavioral and non-spoken word communication. I worked endlessly to make sure that my behavior and my actions never said anything that I wasn't saying with words, so that my behavior told no story at all. That was no accident. That was something I built in myself over a lifetime. And it was the way, long before anyone could diagnose or treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder inattentive type, it was a way for me to get through school and to build the career that I had up until it was unexpectedly ended when my head was smashed in at work one day. What I have clarity about now is that the tools I used, even with stimulants and antidepressants, which for 15, 20 years, through trial and error, I had found some that helped a bit, but that was not the answer. More answers would be available to me if I had put the time in on the cognitive behavioral therapy and the other components of dealing with my internal obsessions. But again and again, no one ever knew anything about me because I never told anyone. So the lessons learned from that are the things I've heard in NAMI over the years. No one knows what you don't tell anyone. The separation of behavior from thoughts got me far in life, but it almost destroyed me after a traumatic brain injury, as I quietly and ultra stoically kept everything in, including false ideas and negative thinking to a point it was cruel. My anger and rage, disgust for one, grew to a point it became a spiritual catastrophe. So I have known cruelty on levels that are difficult to describe. But I did decide in the end of August I would tell my story, be that by writing a book, but really because my eyes are damaged and I can no longer use my left hand, and I have such diminished executive functioning and no memory at all. The way my story will get told is just like this, with spoken word. I have told components of my story 100 times over the last year. Selfie videos everywhere, notes, journal entries everywhere. Always forgetting about entering, recording, writing anything within a day. Always stumbling onto something I have written before or before that, saying to myself, wow, that's what I wanted to say now. I already said it. The words change a tiny amount, but the themes are consistent. Neurologically, I tried to understand why these things are. I get the destruction of my limbic system wiped out memories or the ability to add new memories. It wiped out my hippocampus, my amygdala, which I believe has rewired, somehow neurogenesis rebooted. I have the neurological capability of tremendous amounts of anxiety and fear, and as time goes by, I cross-reference things I am experiencing with the DSM-5 because I am curious, am I diagnostically this or that? And I am finding, yes, I am that. But I have the awareness and insight that I am just passing through these things. People around me who I've cared for and been friends with, some of these things they live a lifetime with, fighting, struggling to survive. So what that tells me, the true mark of bravery and courage, resilience and strength is all around me. Most would never have any idea what I'm speaking about, but I think some will understand. And if the things I am referring to, the people that live as absolute warriors every day, as they quietly, with the mask on, try to find their way in this world that has changed so completely for them as it has for me. My perception of myself has completely changed, where I am still 15 months after a traumatic brain injury, complete destruction of my cervical spine from whiplash injuries, all these things that have yet to be determined, diagnosed, and treated, but will be the end of January with an ACDF surgery. But in my journey, which I have documented thoroughly, I know I have never searched to add 17 new diagnoses. I am actually searching for ways to survive, for ways to manage my risks. And by managing my risks and surviving another day, something else is happening. Without the distractions I once had of my career, my health, financial status, retirement, all those were instantly swept away one day at work. So the awareness I have now, not affected by fears or emotions or worries because they were all taken away. The awareness I have now is extreme, complete, and potentially very dangerous and overwhelming. So I do need to filter some things out that I am aware of and perceive. Having always been intrigued by communications, from emergency communications, shortwave after 9/11 and Sandy took out communications, having built an amateur radio station at the hospital I worked at and got volunteers to teach there, becoming a general class amateur radio operator, all because of my work experiences, all because I was working with emergency management to develop plans to evacuate patients and save lives if need be. What I believe has happened since a traumatic brain injury is my absolute intrigue with communication, nonverbal and verbal, has expanded my ability to receive some communications. It has made me into a dish of sorts. So perceptive, I believe I can literally not only see who wears a mask, I can see behind the mask. The person who is frightened, terrified, suffering. I have, in some ways, become a human suffering detector. I didn't want that, but it's just what has happened as an unexpected outcome of my tolerating intolerable pain, both psychologically and physically combined, in a superstorm of symptoms, which I have been, having been probably the most severely injured registered nurse, at least in the 25 years I worked for the Office of Mental Health of New York State, the most severely injured on-the-job RN, having practically died being saved by an ICU on a ventilator, and then being admitted involuntarily to the CPAP I worked in 35 years ago where I met my wife. Having been on the absolute edges of everything, high risk for everything and everything, anything in any way. So I have been a man of extremes, not because I want that, but it's because what I have got. And I am working with what I've got because it's all I have. And so for anyone else whose perspective has been completely changed, and most people would look at you and have no idea because there's no body parts hanging out of you. You look like you should be okay. Are you lazy? Are you just down in the dumps? Why don't you hang out with family? It's called neurological fatigue, something I never even had any idea of, as well as brain injuries themselves. In 38 years as a registered nurse, I had absolutely no idea what all this would be like after a severe brain injury. I thought you just hit your head, you feel better, and back on the saddle and back to life. Apparently, many nurses and doctors and neurology people have similar misconceptions. I have spoken to an ICU nurse that took care of me on the night shift when I was on a ventilator in a medically induced coma, developing pneumonia, with a one-to-one nurse. That ICU nurse told me he was comfortable working with people with brain injuries on ICU, ER, those environments. But he had never, ever experienced something that he was experiencing with me. He had never spoken to someone who had been his patient that was alert, awake, and could talk to him about his experience. That was the first time for him in his entire career. Learning what I've learned about brain injuries from having my own has been full of firsts. And in ways, every day is a new day, partly because my memory is gone, but partly because I am discovering new things all the time.